Welcome to the Itihasa channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about Drona, the great Dronacharya, the teacher of the Pandavas and the Kauravas and the Hastinapur princes, the great teacher who finally fought in the Kurukshetra war leading the Kaurava army for a few days. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Amme Narayana, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Anjanaya Namaha, Om Subramanyaya Namaha, Swamiye Sharanamayyappo, Om Guruve Namaha. Drona is a man of many layers, a complex man, a phenomenal man. And we could go on about him and his life and his deeds and the various aspects of it. And I'll try to get all of it down into one medium-sized episode. So last time we had discussed the birth of Drona. We had said how Drona was born through a relationship between the great Rishi Bharadvaja and the beautiful Apsara Gritachi. And we had discussed how Bharadvaja had written many treatises on medicine, and he was the one who first described that a child is born when there's a union between the seed of a man and the menstrual blood of a woman, and that the child first forms as an embryo and then grows up to a normal human. And obviously, a man who knew all this would know that a child cannot be born only from the seed of a man. But yet, Drona, in his recounting the story of his birth, always maintained that he was born not from a mother, only from the seed of a man in a river shell, his father Bharadvaja. It kind of exemplified the phenomenon of Drona, and the greatness of Drona was exemplified by the fact that he was not born from a woman. And Drona used this knowledge to the hilt. Such was the man Drona. So after his birth, Drona studied under his father in his Gurukul, at the Gurukul of the great Rishi Bharadvaja. People from various places came to this great Gurukul, which taught the art of war, which taught the Vedas, the Shastras, economics, physics, chemistry, astrophysics, astronomy, and so many other sciences that were prevalent in those days, 7 to 10,000 years ago. And one among the students who had come to this ashrama to learn was the son of the king of Panchala, King Prishata or Saumaka of Panchala. There were a couple of names that he was known by. His son, Drupada, came to this ashrama to learn. Drupada was also called Yajnasena in the earlier times, in his younger years. So we will interchangeably use the name Yajnasena or Drupada, for they were both his names when he was young. And so the young Drupada or Yajnasena came to the Gurukula of Rishi Bharadvaja to study under him. Drupada had a natural talent for the art of war. He was a great archer, excellent archer, and it was said that when he grew up, he was one of the greatest archers of the time in Bharatvarsha. He was a Maharati of phenomenal capacity. And it used to be said that when Drupada used to rain down arrows, his hands were a blur and you could barely see the hands moving between the quiver and the bow and the arrow being shot. Such was his greatness. But this greatness didn't extend to the theoretical subjects, the Vedas, the Shastras, and the other theoretical subjects. And he didn't fare too well in it. Luckily for him, the son of Bharadvaja, Drona, studied in the same Gurukula. And Bharadvaja was quite considerate, knowing that this Kshatriya Drupada would eventually be a great Maharata. But he expected some amount of knowledge to be gained by Drupada at that point too. And Drona, knowing that he had a great friend in Drupada, a powerful friend, ensured that he was at Drupada's side all the time. And so when Drupada had difficulty with the subjects and his memory would fail him, it was Drona who came to his rescue and told him the answers in secret and taught him separately where Drupada would not know. For Drona had a phenomenal memory where Drupada didn't have much. And so during one of these times in their young years as young boys, probably when Drona had helped Drupada in maybe an exam or maybe in revision of it for an exam, Drupada's heart was overwhelmed with love for Drona, and he told Drona that when I grow up and I will be the king of Panchala, half my kingdom will be yours. Come and we shall rule together. And Drupada, like he did with the Vedas and the Shastras, forgot it promptly. And Drona, like he did with the Vedas and Shastras, never forgot a word. And so, in time, these two young men learnt a lot from the sages who came and taught in the Gurukula of Bharadwaja and from the great Bharadwaja himself. And they went their separate ways. Drupada went back to his father's kingdom, Panchala, where his father Prishata or Saumaka subsequently died, and then Drupada became the king. Drona continued in his father's ashrama for some time, and it was there that the great sage Agnivesha had come, and Bharadwaja had taught Agnivesha the Agnyastra, and Agnivesha then taught Drona the Agnyastra, being prompted by Bharadwaja to do so. And so over time, Drona learnt most of the astras, the usage of the astras from his father and from his father's other disciples, who then taught Drona very efficiently. And over time, Drona became a master of the art of war. Excellent fighter of every form, of every weapon. He was equally efficient with the sword or the mace or even the bow and the arrow and the spear. And eventually Drona decided to get married. And there was a very distant cousin of his in the kingdom of Hastinapur, Kripi. We had described the birth of Kripa and Kripi, who were descendants of Gautama from Angirasa. So very distant cousin Kripi, Drona married her. And Kripi of the short hair and Drona decided to set up a life for themselves. And Drona knew that his knowledge of the astras and the knowledge of war and the art of war would hold him in good stead in time, and he would open a Gurukul where great kings from all over the country would come to train under him, like they did under his father in Bharadwaja's Gurukul. And so Drona went to a small town and set up this great Gurukul. But the only people who came there were the young children of the rural families, and it was like a PhD professor of philosophy teaching kindergarten children physics. So Drona didn't do too well in the ashrama, and eventually the money also wasn't that great. But a child was born to Kripi and Drona, and that child was a phenomenal child. It was said that when the child was born, the child's cry resembled the great horse Uchchashravasa, the divine horse that came out from the Samudra Manthana and which was taken by Indra to Devaloka. And this child's cry resembled the neighing of that horse Uchchashravasa. And so it was said that a divine voice came in the sky, or it could be the astrologers who deciphered that this child should be named Ashwathama, Ashwa meaning horse. And so Drona and Kripi had this wonderful child, Ashwathama, a child that it was said was absolutely strong and muscular even when it was little. And Drona immediately knew, seeing the beautiful markings on the body of this child, that this child will be great one day. But Drona's finances never really picked up, and he would move from town to town, village to village, setting up gurukulas and then failing and going on and so forth. Until one time in a gurukula where he had set up in a small town, there were some older boys who were playing with Ashwathama and they happened to drink some milk in front of him. Drona never had a milch cow or a cow that would give milk. And so Ashwathama, his son, had never seen milk all his infancy. And he asked these children, "What is that white thing you're drinking?" And they were shocked that the child didn't know what milk looked like. And they realized this was a good time to tease the little boy, and they mixed some water with some white powder and gave him this white looking liquid and said, "This is milk, drink it." And this child Ashwathama drank that white liquid thinking it's milk. And in his joy, he went dancing and screaming everywhere, "I have drunk milk, I have drunk milk." And Drona, who was passing by at that time, saw these children laughing and saying, "Oh, the great Drona who thinks he's a great teacher. His child has never seen milk. And today is drinking white-colored water thinking it's milk. Oh, what a shame, what a shame." And Drona was flabbergasted and in absolute shame. Drona had seen absolute penury and poverty. And he swore that never again would he ever let his child see that kind of penury again. He swore that never would his son or he be insulted for not having money. And at that point of time, when he realized that he needed to get the luxuries for his child and to ensure that his child had money, he knew there was only one place he could go to, and that was his erstwhile friend Drupada. For he remembered that when they were children, Drupada had promised half his kingdom for him, and he now decided to take Drupada up on that promise. And so saying, Drona took Kripi, his wife, and his son Ashwathama to the great kingdom of Panchala to meet his close friend Drupada. For he knew that he was going to get half the kingdom of the Panchalas, and he knew his woes would come to an end. And so he walked to the great kingdom of Panchala, entered the courtroom unannounced, walked to the middle of the courtroom where the great Drupada was conducting his affairs in serious concentration, and looked up to him and said, "Oh, Drupada, remember me, I am Drona, and I have come to take half your kingdom. You remember you had promised me this?" And Drupada was shocked. For who was this man who suddenly walked into his kingdom, right in the middle of the court proceedings, and called him by name, not as a king, and said, "Drupada, give me half the kingdom." And Drupada was flabbergasted. He couldn't understand what was happening. Of course, his memory of that promise that he had made, the notes for half my kingdom when he was a young child, escaped him. And Drona held him to that promise. And in that instance, Drupada couldn't recognize Drona, for time had passed and Drona had changed. And even the memory of the name Drona had gone away. And Drupada was shocked at the countenance of the man who came in from the street and asked for half his kingdom. And there were smiles and laughs going all around the courtiers, who then wondered who this man was. And Drupada got angry. And Drupada started insulting Drona and asked him, "Who do you think you are to come and walk into my kingdom and say you want half my kingdom? What do you think you are?" And Drona was surprised that Drupada didn't remember it. And Drona told Drupada, "You promised me half the kingdom, for I helped you when you were a young boy." And the memory still escaped Drupada. He looked back at Drona and said, "I may have made some trivial promises as a child. That doesn't mean I have to abide by them. For who are you? You're a common man and I'm a king, and there can be no friendship between you, a common man, and me, a king." And this was the ultimate insult that was put at Drona. Drona started seething in anger at the vile insult given to him by Drupada. And in his anger, Drona looked up at Drupada at the haughty look that Drupada gave him, and told him that one day I will come and take away my rightful share of half your kingdom from you. I shall train the Kshatriya princes of this land who will who will then come and wage war against you and take half your kingdom away. And Drupada just laughed at him in disgust, and Drona walked away in extreme rage. Seeing the look of terror on Drona's face when he came out of the palace, Kripi, who was waiting outside with Ashwatthama, knew that nothing good has happened in this kingdom. And Drona then took his wife and child and walked away from Panchala, swearing to come back and conquer the kingdom and take away half his share. Drona took that promise made by a student that he would give half his kingdom for the notes of the day very seriously. And Drona came home in utter shame. And in utter shame, he was in tears in front of his wife Kripi. And in tears, he admitted that he has failed as a father, for he was not able to give even the basic level of luxury for his son. And Drona then decided that he will go forth and seek alms from great people all over Bharatvarsha and get money home so that he can give his child a luxurious life. And so saying, he took Kripi and Ashwatthama to Hastinapur, and he requested his wife's brother Kripa to keep his wife Kripi and the child Ashwatthama in Hastinapur under the luxury of the Hastinapur palace, while he went forth seeking knowledge and money. And at that time, Drona heard that the great Bhargava Parasurama was giving off all his wealth and everything that he owned. And hearing this, Drona made a beeline to Mount Mahendra where Parasurama stayed, and then approached the great Parasurama and said, I have come to take from you, for I have heard that you are giving away all your material wealth that you have, which you have accumulated over the years. And Parasurama said, you have come a little late, my child, for I have given off everything. All my material wealth has been distributed among all the rishis of the land. The only things I have now with me are my weapons and the knowledge of them, of how to use them efficiently. And Drona said, then teach me how to do it. And Parasurama looked at Drona and said, I will teach you everything I know, for I see that your build and your body is that of a warrior. You're a brahmana warrior, much like me. And it is just right that you learn the art of war. But I shall teach you all that I know only on one condition, that you do not reveal these secrets to any kshatriya ever in the future. And Drona promised the great Bhargava that he would never reveal anything that was taught to him by the great Parasurama to any kshatriya ever in the future. And so saying, the great Bhargava Parasurama taught Drona everything he knew in the art of war. Archery, the astras, the art of how to use the parasu or the axe and the sword. And under his guidance, Drona studied for a few years and learnt everything that Parasurama could teach. It was said at the time that there were only 3 people in all of Bharatvarsha who could take any object, not just an arrow, and infuse the power of the astra in it. For most astras of the time, needed a vehicle to be discharged, and that vehicle was always the arrow fitted on a bow. Occasionally, you could use a mace and infuse the astra into the mace and hurl it. But most of the time, as these astras need to be hurled long distances, they needed to be hurled with the arrow as shot from a bow. But it was said that only 3 individuals in all of Bharatvarsha could infuse the power of the astra in everyday objects other than the arrow and use it with equal efficiency. Of course, it was the great Parasurama Bhargava who had then taught it to Bhishma, or Devavrata as he was known when he was in Devaloka. Ganga had brought Bhishma, Devavrata, to learn under the tutelage of Parasurama the Bhargava. And Parasurama the Bhargava had taught only one kshatriya in his lifetime, and that was Bhishma, because Ganga insisted on it. And the only other person who was given this knowledge was Drona. So at that point of time, there were only three people in all of Bharatvarsha who could infuse the power of any astra on any common object, be it a reed of grass, be it a small stick, be it a ball, or a mace or an arrow. And so, after having learnt everything that the Bhargava had to teach, Drona took the blessings of Parasurama. Parasurama reminded him once more that this knowledge should not go to a Kshatriya ever. And Drona, the great man, said yes and came down straight to Hastinapur. Right to Hastinapur to teach the Kaurava and the Pandava princes, the epitome of Kshatriyas. That was the great Drona. So Drona ran down from the Mahendra mountain into Bharatvarsha and came to Hastinapur and lived with Kripa and Kripi and his child Ashwathama. By and by, the great Drona lived in Hastinapur in Kripa's house. He lived incognito, he wouldn't show himself out to anybody, but he would quietly watch the young Pandava princes and the young Kaurava princes come to Kripa's ashrama to learn from him. And he would spend his time teaching his own son Ashwathama various things in the art of war. And Ashwathama would mingle with the kings, with the princes of Hastinapur, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and built a friendship with them. In time, Ashwathama would start teaching the princes of Hastinapur a little bit what he had learned from his father Drona, and a friendship blossomed between the princes and Ashwathama. Presently, one day, the princes of Hastinapur, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, went to play with the bat and the ball in a nearby playground. And Drona stood watching on the sidelines, under the shade of a tree, watching these Hastinapur princes play. And he knew that destiny was going to change for him and there was greatness in store for him. And as the boys played, one of them hit the ball too hard and it flew right across the ground into a well nearby and fell into the well. And these great Hastinapur princes started gathering around the well and looking in to find a way to take the ball out. And as they contemplated what they should do, these Hastinapur princes saw a tall man, absolutely muscular in countenance and a very pleasant face, with charcoal twinkling eyes, come and give a sweet smile to them. And they were enamored by him and they were struck by him. And he said, "What are these princes doing?" And they said, "Our ball's fallen into the well and we need to get it out." And this handsome, tall, muscular man smiled at them and said, "Y'all are the great princes of Hastinapur. Y'all will one day be the kings of the land. How is it that you're not able to collect the simple ball from the well? None of y'all have the ability to do it?" And these boys were quite aghast. They looked at him and said, "Would you be able to do something like that?" He said, "Yes, why not? It's a trivial matter." And they looked at him and said, "Then show us how you can do it." And he said, "Okay, I shall." And then he took his ring out from his finger and he threw that down into the well. And they were shocked. And they said, "You've thrown the ring also down the well. You're not going to get your ring back. Far from it, you're not going to get the ball back either." He said, "I shall get both back." And the great Drona then plucked out a reed from around the well. He spoke a mantra into it, and the reed became as hard as a shaft of an arrow. And then, speaking another mantra, he threw this arrow-like reed into the well, and when the boys looked down, it had pierced the ball in the well. And they asked, "But how are you going to pull it out now?" And then he took another reed, and speaking the same mantras in sequence, he picked reed after reed, made them hard as the shafts of the arrows, and started sending them down into the well one behind the other, till they formed a chain coming down from the ball up into the hands of Drona himself. And carefully he pulled this chain of arrows out, reeds which had become as hard as a shaft of arrows. Pulling them out, he drew the ball out, and then sending the reed back again into the water. Speaking a mantra, he sent the reed back into the water, and this reed flew down with immense speed into the water and came up with a ring. And the great Drona looked at the Pandavas and the Kauravas and said, "Did you not see what I just did? Can you do the same thing?" And these boys were stunned. They asked, "Who are you, O great sir? Reveal yourself to us, for we want you to teach us how you did this." And Drona smiled at them and said, "You have a grand uncle in the kingdom. Go to him. Describe to him exactly what I did. Tell him in absolute precision exactly what I did, and he will know who I am." And these children took their ball and bat and ran back to the palace to their Pitamaha Bhishma and touched his feet and started screaming at him and shouting at him, and all of them telling their stories at one time until Bhishma realized something has happened. And he told them all to keep quiet and said, "If you'll scream like this, I can't understand what you're saying. One of you stand up and tell me what happened." And Yudhishthira stood forward, the eldest Pandava, and described in absolute detail what they saw. And Bhishma closed his eyes and said, "There are only two men in Bharatvarsha who could do this. One is my Guru Bhargava the Parasurama, and one is Drona, who had gone to him recently and learnt from him. And it cannot be the Bhargava, for the Bhargava wouldn't come down here. It has to be Drona. Come, my children, let us all go and receive this man. He is one of the greatest warriors of our time, a brahmana warrior, and he would be the one to teach you now onwards. For you have learnt enough from Kripa and Kripi, and there is not much more you could learn from them. But for advanced training, there can be only one man, and that is Drona." And so, with all the princes in tow, in large chariots, the great Bhishma went to the ashram of Kripa, where these children had seen Drona, took Drona in his arms and hugged him tight and said, "I have heard of you, for you have learned from the great Bhargava Parasurama, my teacher. There are only two in this entire Bharatvarsha who could make a reed infused with the power of the astra and send the reed down into the well. And I knew that there can be only one man who could do it, and that was you. Come, welcome to our palace." And so saying, with all the honors, Bhishma brought Drona back into the Hastinapur palace. He then took Drona to his room, ensured that he had the adequate argya and padya, the washing of the hands and the feet, and with great respect looked at him and said, "What brings the great Drona to our kingdom? What brings you here? Pray tell me." And then Drona told Bhishma about the life he had and the penury he faced for most of it, and told him that when he had gone to his friend's kingdom, expecting Drupada to give him his due, his promised share, Drupada insulted him and kicked him out of his courtroom, and that insult could not be forgotten. And Bhishma said, "You will never be insulted here. This is your land now. This is your kingdom now. Ask for whatever you want and you shall have it. We shall make a Gurukul on the outskirts of Hastinapur, the size of which would never be seen. You shall have any amount of clothes and gold and silver and cows that you demand. The coffers of Hastinapur are open for you. You can take whatever you want and no question will be asked. You shall live a life of luxury till the very last breath that you take." And this is the promise of Bhishma. And if Bhishma has made a promise, it shall be kept. And Drona was overjoyed. He knew that his life was made. But he looked gravely at Bhishma and told him, "But I have a slight problem there. There is a problem I have with the king of Panchala, Drupada, and I cannot take that insult lying down. I shall teach your princess as well as I can. I shall make them worthy warriors. I shall make them the best warriors of the land, for there shall be no other Ratha or Maharatha in the future who shall compete with them, who shall even equal them in their archery and their art of war. But as Guru Dakshina, I shall demand one thing. I shall expect your princes to go and conquer the king of Panchala Drupada and bring him as prisoner to me. And Bhishma knew the quality of training that Drona would give. And if Drona would be such a great teacher, he would ensure that the teaching would be of such high quality that they would be able to conquer the kingdom of Panchala. And Bhishma wanted nothing more. For the Panchalas were known to have extremely strong ramparts and defenses, unbeatable. And so Bhishma said, you may take whatever in the form of Guru Dakshina you wish. We want you to teach the princes. And so the advanced training for the Hastinapur princes began. And this is how Bhishma ensured that Drona got every bit of luxury and he would remain in that luxury for the rest of his mortal life. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Anjanaya Namaha, Swami Sharanam Ayappo, Om Subramanyaya Namaha, Om Guruve Namaha.